Imagine the world you're living in is taken over by the Demon King, and of course, the world is full of injustice and tyranny. And to bring peace back to the world again, that demon slayer has to die. But how? When none of the heroes can beat him. That's where our hero shows up and manages to defeat the Demon King. But sadly, he dies along with him. Luckily, he ends up in another world. So, what will our hero do in this new world? What problems will he face? And the most important question, will he be able to regain his power or not? Our anime begins with our hero Blade, brave and with unmatched power, standing in front of the Monster King and telling him, let's drop all this pointless stuff we're doing and get serious. The Monster King replies, I'm watching you. And both of them use their powers. Blade uses dragon power, and the Monster King uses destruction power. After their first strike, both get extremely tired and can't even catch their breath. Blade's hair turns white, and both of them raise their swords at the same time and stab each other in the body. Blade falls to the ground, bleeding, and says, finally, it's all over, and the Monster King dies. After some time in the war, Blade comes back from the dead miraculously. He decides to start a whole new life and joins Rosewood Academy. He can't believe it and wants to make lots of friends, like he was deprived, to the point that he goes around greeting all his classmates even though he doesn't know any of them. The students around him see Blade as this chill guy with cool hair and a fun personality, so they say he must be new at the academy. When Blade hears them, he walks over to greet them and introduce himself, but he's a bit too excited and talks fast, which makes them nervous and find him a little weird. But he ends up meeting Kasim, Klee, Yashika, and Claire, and they tell him they could be his friends. Blade tells them he came here mainly to meet people and make friends, and he gets hyped because he's only been here a few minutes and already made 4 friends, and says by the end of the day he might hit 100. They laugh at him and tell him if he wants to make 100 friends, he'll need to meet the whole academy. Then the moody Ernest shows up and asks why they're being so loud. Blade asks them, who's that? And they tell him, that's Ernest, the top student at the academy. We all call her the Empress. Blade goes to introduce himself, but she turns out to be not only moody, but also rude, and talks badly to Blade when he tells her he's just joined the academy. She tells him he's lying because the academy only accepts heroes who protect the world, and there's no way they'd accept someone like him, especially coming in late. He tells her he came here to meet them and be friends, and asks if she could take him to the principal's office if she knows where it is. She agrees and goes with him to the office, knocks, and they enter. But Ernest is shocked to find that the one in the office is His Majesty the King, so she bows out of respect, but Blade acts like the guy in front of him is just some regular dude, which to Ernest is complete disrespect. She keeps hinting and signaling, saying, confused, don't you know who's in front of you? The king laughs at them while she's grabbing Blade by the neck, forcing his head down, and the king tells her he heard about her from the former academy principal, and now he's the new principal. Ernest gets surprised and happy at the same time and tells him it's an honor for her to study in the academy he's in. Then the king tells her he needs a quick word alone with Blade, so if she could kindly step outside for a bit. She looks Blade up and down, clearly annoyed, and walks out mumbling about him behind the door while they hear her and ignore it. And Blade turns out to be rude too and speaks to the king with disrespect, asking what brought him here. The king tells him he wants him to go back to being a hero like before, and that the academy will help him slowly regain the half of his power that was taken. But Blade tells him that the days of war and monsters are over, and he's not going back to fighting. He wants to live his life now. But the king insists that he stays in the academy and trains well until he gets his power back. Then Blade heads to attend his classes, and his first lesson is a practical one, where they train on activating their powers. The moment Ernest sees him, she asks what he's doing here since this class is for top students, and he's only been at the academy for barely 2 hours. Blade pulls out something he got from the academy that allows him to skip all the earlier levels and go straight to the advanced class. So Ernest tells him he must be a cheater and did something to trick the academy into putting him in the advanced class, because he looks weak and silly. But Blade surprises her with his reaction. He doesn't care at all about what she said and goes to meet everyone, treating her really nicely too because he's planning for her to be one of his friends. So she goes to the class instructor and tells him they should change the lesson's topic today because they want to test the new student's strength. They place in front of Blade a solid metal structure that's very hard for anyone to break, and she tells Blade if he can't break it, he has to admit he's weak and leave the academy and never show his face again. Blade confidently agrees, pulls out his sword, and uses dragon power again, but instead of just breaking the structure, he destroys part of the academy wall, sending Ernest flying, and everyone standing there is shocked and frozen in disbelief. After that training, they head to the dining hall to have lunch, and Blade goes to sit with Ernest, who's sitting alone at a table. He waves to his friends to come sit with them, but they refuse. So Ernest tells him they won't come because of her since they're scared of her, and she apologizes, saying he really turned out to be strong, not like she thought, and there's no problem with them being friends. Blade gets happy, and she finishes eating and heads to her room, trying to hide her joy because Blade is her first ever friend. Suddenly, the sword she has hanging on the wall starts shaking. At that moment, she remembers herself as a child, when the sword was hanging there and calling to her, and the moment she touched it, she felt something strange. Her hair turned red, and evil thoughts of destruction and fire started haunting her everywhere because of the sword. But she resisted because she's from a great family with a strong reputation. The next day, she goes to her training at the academy and acts crazy, taking out her anger on her classmates, showing no mercy, to the point they surrender the moment it's their turn. She then calls out Blade to spar with her, but he tells her she looks really tired and can't possibly train anymore. But she pretends she's fine and starts to say she's okay, but doesn't get the chance because she faints. He picks her up and takes her to the infirmary, and the doctor tells him she can't help her because health-wise, she's fine. But what she's going through is probably caused by a curse or magic, and that's not her field. At that moment, Ernest wakes up, and Blade helps her leave the infirmary. When they reach the academy, she pulls herself together and tells him not to mention what he heard to anyone. That's when Blade gets curious to know what curse or magic is on Ernest, so he heads to the control room at the academy using a gem that can open the door, and sits at the magic computer. He finds that Ernest owns a famous cursed sword and learns everything about it. He then goes to Ernest and tells her he wants to talk to her about something important. She thinks his intentions are bad and that he's there to blackmail her and take her place in the academy with the info he found. But he tells her she totally misunderstood, because she's the one who matters, not the title or the useless talk she's saying. She believes him and starts talking to him, telling him that when she was little, she accidentally grabbed the cursed sword. Since then, it's been trying to control her, but she's always resisted it. Blade tells her there's only one way to get rid of those thoughts in her head, and that is to let the sword take control, and when it does, the monster inside it will appear, and she must defeat it. She tells him she's scared she might fail. He tells her that if anything goes wrong, he'll be there and defeat the monster himself. That gives her some courage, and she lets the sword control her. The monster appears, and Blade stands back and watches, and sees Ernest coming out of the fiery vortex, telling him she succeeded. And that totally changed Ernest's personality. She literally became a girl who wears dresses and treats her friends kindly. The next day they have training at the academy, and Ernest is the leader and supervisor. She notices Blade training with Ronaldo without his sword, dodging all Ronaldo's attacks with just his body without striking back. So Ernest goes to tell him that he must use his sword because this is considered an insult to Ronaldo. At that moment, Blade feels like something is different about Ernest and starts thinking about what exactly changed in her. She stands in front of him acting sweet for the first time ever, waiting for a compliment. But he tells her he doesn't know, and she gets shy and quickly changes the subject. She tells him she's noticed that Sophie always trains alone and never acts naturally around anyone. All she does is follow any command people give her. So she asks him to go talk to Sophie for a bit and try to get her to engage in conversation. Blade goes to talk to Sophie and gets to know her. He tells her he wants to train with her, but before they even start, the session ends and he doesn't even get to say 2 words to her. So Ernest tells him he can still train her even if there's no session, and he listens to her and starts teaching Sophie some moves. At first, Sophie can't even break the metal structure, she barely scratches it. But after a bit of training, she smashes like 10 of those metal frames at once. Blade tells her she's training and learning really fast, and he's proud of her. She tells him she wants him to teach her more new moves tomorrow, and he agrees, and they walk off together. After that, Blade goes to the principal's office to talk to the king. The king asks him how things are going at the academy, and Blade tells him really great. He's made lots of friends just like he wanted. So he asks him, who's the closest one to you now? Blade says lately it might be Sophie, since he's training her. The king tells him Sophie is a very good girl, but still not complete. That word catches Blade's attention a lot, and he's confused and asks the king, what do you mean not complete? The king tells him Sophie was actually created as a backup after Blade quit the wars, and they called her the Artificial Hero Project. That's when Blade is truly shocked, and we learn Sophie used to be a normal human, but they took her and gave her the hero's power artificially. That made her like a robot, just following orders without question. And for the record, she's version 12 in the project. There were 11 before her, and they had many problems, which made Sophie's powers incomplete. But His Majesty reassures Blade and tells him he already shut down the project. And since Sophie was the last one, he gave her freedom and told her to do whatever she wants. And since it was an order from the king, Sophie followed it. After that, Blade leaves the king's office feeling truly depressed and heartbroken for Sophie, and guilty that she was made as his backup after he retired from war. But then he makes a life-changing decision, to give Sophie her life back. So he goes around asking everyone he knows how to make someone live their life and be happy. The first person he asks tells him, with love. So then he goes to Ernest and asks her how to make someone love. She blushes, thinking he's talking about her, and tells him maybe they can go out and talk and walk a bit. Blade takes those words from her and runs straight to Sophie's room and invites her to go out together. She agrees, and as Blade heads to meet Sophie, we find Ernest with Claire and Yashika hiding behind a tree, spying on Blade because Ernest is jealous. As soon as Sophie arrives, Blade pulls out the notebook he's carrying and tells her the plan for the outing. It turns out he made a super detailed schedule down to the minute and second. They start their date, holding hands, and take off. Blade literally takes her around the city. First they go see the fish, then play together and cause a little chaos, and Ernest keeps cleaning up after them. Then they go have drinks together, and this time Blade is the one feeling shy around Sophie because it's his first time going out with a girl. After they finish, Blade opens his notebook and realizes they were supposed to be at the fountain but are running 5 full minutes late, and that makes him super nervous. So Sophie grabs his hand and flies them there to arrive faster, and they do make it. By nighttime, they sit in front of the magical fountain, and the view is absolutely beautiful and enchanting. Ernest can't catch up with them, so they get to sit alone without anyone watching. At that moment, Sophie feels really comfortable with Blade, so she decides to tell him the hidden truth. She shows him her artificial hero power, including how she can break all laws of physics, like cancel gravity or stop time. But since she's an incomplete project, she can't control her abilities well, and they barely last 10 seconds. She tells him everything about the project, hiding nothing. So Blade tells her, since you're being honest, I'll be honest too, I won't hide anything from you. And he tells her he's the original hero the whole project was created for in the first place. He sincerely apologizes to her and starts crying because her life was ruined because of him, but he had no other way out. After every war, he barely escaped death, constantly injured, ending up in the hospital. He never had a normal life, no family, no friends. And even that wasn't good enough for people. Whenever he failed or someone died and he couldn't save them, they blamed him, asking, why didn't you save him? Aren't you the great hero? And that used to kill him inside. Until the last time, he decided to retire and live a normal life. When Sophie sees Blade in such a broken state, she comforts him and tells him that ever since she got her freedom, she's traveled the whole world to find herself, and saw a world that wouldn't exist in its beauty and peace if it weren't for him. She asks him not to blame himself, because without him, a lot of things wouldn't be here. Blade is moved by her words and thanks her for what she said. It helped him feel a little better. He tells her that his past won't be allowed to affect his new life anymore, and she also promises him that his past will stay a secret just between them. The next day, Blade and Sophie sit with Ernest at breakfast in the academy, and this time it's Blade's friends who want to sit at the same table with Ernest because she's changed, and they all have breakfast together. Ernest tells them today is a very special day because she heard the principal is bringing them a magical beast just for training. But when they all hear this news, they get really scared because it's their first time seeing or dealing with a magical beast. Except Blade, who keeps eating and doesn't notice what's happening around him. So Ernest gets annoyed and repeats what she said in front of him to get his attention. This time he hears her, but doesn't really care, so she gives up and goes quiet. But suddenly, a huge tremor hits the academy. Everyone gets scared, and Ernest tells them that must be the beast. It's probably arrived now, and that's why the academy is shaking. They all go to check it out excitedly, but they're shocked to see that the beast invading the academy is a giant dragon. They all get really scared, because dragons aren't just regular magical beasts, they're way stronger. The chance of defeating one at their level is nearly impossible. But Blade acts cool and goes to stand in front of the dragon, still holding his food and eating. And when he sees that the dragon isn't listening and keeps smashing and destroying the school, he jumps and slaps the dragon in the face. The dragon falls and doesn't get back up, and the moment Blade turns his back, they're all shocked to see the dragon has turned into a little girl running toward him and calling him Dad. Everyone stands frozen in shock, and Blade asks them, who's that? Ernest and Sophie tell him the dragon turned into the little girl, but they don't understand how. The girl is clinging to Blade and won't let go, like he's her real dad. So Blade has no choice but to take care of her for now until he figures something out, and he names her Ko and takes her to his room and cares for her. Ernest comes in and tells him what she found out, that she learned dragons are very powerful and noble creatures, and when another being defeats them, a small part of their spirit remains, forming into the image of the one who beat them and getting attached to them, but this is extremely rare. Blade was just lucky it happened through him. The next day, Blade goes to have breakfast with his friends and takes Ko with him, sits her down with him, and even feeds her himself. He really loves her, and she's so attached to him, that when one of his friends tries to talk to her, she jumps on him because she doesn't want attention from anyone else but Blade. After she finishes eating, she tells him she's going for a walk around the academy. His friends are upset with how he treats Ko, saying he's not her real dad and shouldn't act that way. When it's time for training, Ko goes to Blade, and the moment he sees her, he tells her to come so they can train together. But as she walks up to him, he gets distracted talking to his classmates because they're asking him important stuff, and when he turns to check on her, she's gone. He goes looking for her, and she's wandering alone when she stumbles upon a group of lower-class students training. She clearly wants to join and meet them, but doesn't do it. When Blade arrives and tells her to go play with them, she refuses and says dragons can't interact with weaker creatures, and he's the only strong one at this school. She breaks his heart, and he takes her back to his room and puts her to bed. As he's about to sleep, Ernest knocks on the door, so he goes out to talk with her for a bit. She's there to check on him and brings Sophie with her, and she tells him he can't act like Ko's dad forever and that he needs to find another solution. Blade tells her he's just worried about Ko and doesn't want her to feel lonely, because they're the two who know exactly how hard that is. So Ernest tells him they need to find a solution, and if he ever needs her help, he should come to her. She leaves, and he returns to his room only to find Ko gone and sitting on the rooftop. He joins her there, and she's staring at the sky, telling him she doesn't need anything in the world except him. That hits him deeply, so he decides to get her attached to someone else strong at school so she gets used to it. And the only one he can think of is the king, so he takes her to hang out with him for a while. After he finishes his classes, he goes to pick her up but finds the king in bad shape and looking wrecked. He asks him what happened and where Ko is. The king says Ko's a naughty girl, she wrecked the whole office and ran off. So Blade goes looking for her and finds her back in his room, playing with toys and naming each toy after one of the academy students. That's when Blade realizes Ko needs friends around her, not what she claims. So he leaves the room and bangs his head against the wall because he feels he's the reason for what happened to her. When Ernest sees him, she asks what's wrong, and he tells her that because of him, Ko will always be alone, and he won't be able to help her, and someday he'll leave her, and it'll all be his fault. Ernest tells him not to treat himself that way and that whenever he has a problem like this, he should come to them, and they'll help him, because they're his friends, just like he always helps them. She promises they'll find a solution for Ko, and the next day she goes with Blade to the lower class students, because they figured if Ko gets defeated by lots of students stronger than her, she'll befriend them all and won't feel lonely. So they go and beg all the lower classes to defeat Ko, and Ernest begs them herself. And when they see the Empress of the Academy doing that, they agree instantly. Blade's class also joins and helps convince the whole Academy, and once everyone agrees, they organize a tournament that gathers the entire academy. Blade convinces Ko to turn back into her dragon form again so that when they beat her and her spirit reshapes, she can connect with all of them. When the time for the tournament comes, the king is present watching them, and Blade is standing next to him, nervous and not interfering. All the students are below, led by Ernest, and the battle keeps going at full power. Ernest keeps yelling at them to form 4 groups, and each one should attack from a side to trap Ko. They really start attacking, and the hits rain down on Ko. But the surprise is that Ko isn't affected by anything. Blade is standing there, excited, wanting to see what will happen. But suddenly, the king looks at him with full confidence and tells him that these attacks, even if they slow Ko down a bit, will never defeat her, because dragon skin is so thick, and these attacks won't do anything. And he's right. Ernest sees that all those hits haven't even scratched her, but no one even thinks about giving up. On the contrary, each one decides to attack in their own way. Sophie flies like a hawk and strikes Ko without mercy. Ronaldo, using his cunning mind, digs a hole beneath her feet, and as soon as she steps on it, boom, she flips face first and can't get up. Ernest grabs her sword, which now looks like scrap metal from overuse, and it screams at her, begging her to stop. But she doesn't listen and hits Ko with slashes and fire like a storm, wiping out everything. Suddenly, the crucial moment comes. Ernest raises her sword to the sky, and all her friends run to her, each placing a hand on her shoulder, and their powers begin to gather in the sword. An enormous energy surges from it, and in one single moment, they all attack Ko together, and boom, a terrifying explosion shakes the ground. Ko comes out of it barely alive and admits her defeat, and Blade jumps with joy and rushes to Ko, asking her if she can now consider the whole academy her friends. She agrees because of Blade. If it were up to her, she'd wipe them all out one by one after what they did to her. Blade taps her on the head, telling her to behave and make friends. Everyone already loves her. And when they all sit down to eat together, they fight over who will feed her. And she keeps jumping onto each of their legs so they'll feed her. Blade is happy with what's happening, and he notices that Ernest is also eating, but something feels different about her. So he starts thinking and looking, and they all start winking at him to stay quiet, but he doesn't get it. He tells Ernest that he feels like she's gained a bit of weight. She's deeply hurt, gets super embarrassed, grabs her food, and runs to her room. Everyone's shocked by what Blade just did and ask him how he could say that. He doesn't even understand what he did wrong. The girls tell him Ernest will probably cut ties with him now after what he said, because if it were them, they'd definitely do that. 3 days go by, and they notice Ernest is missing. She's not attending her classes and locked herself in her room. They say it must be because of Blade. So they go and scare him, telling him Ernest is definitely upset because of what he said, and if he doesn't go apologize, their friendship will be over forever. Because he really loves Ernest as a friend, he goes with his friends to talk to her. But when they knock, she doesn't answer. So they open the door. It's a bit dark and no one sees anything, except Ko, who's found attacking a pile of food on the floor, eating like crazy. When they turn the lights on, they find Ernest sitting on the ground eating a huge amount of sweets. Her weight's blown up. Everyone's shocked, and she tells them that ever since she defeated Ko and gave all her power to the sword, her energy started draining quickly and she's always starving. That's why she gained weight. Blade asks her if she's upset with him or not. Ernest tells him she's not mad at all. So he says, good, and leaves. But Claire grabs him by the back of his neck, pulls his hair, and tells him that since he's the reason she gained weight, he better fix it now and say something nice before he walks out. After lots of attempts, he finally tells her that he'll help her lose weight and get back to the Ernest they used to know, because that's their duty as her friends. And starting the next day, they get serious. Ernest doesn't stop dieting and exercising. Blade is with her 24/7 for workouts and running. Her girlfriends bring her healthy, low-calorie meals so she doesn't gain weight, and they even make her go to the sauna to burn more. After all that, they wait for her to step on the scale to see how much she lost. But as soon as she steps on it, the scale glitches and breaks, and it turns out she gained more weight than before. It's a total shock for everyone after everything they did for her. Feeling hopeless, she goes to Blade and tells him there's only one solution left: to use the sword's great power until fire bursts out, then all the fat will burn, and she'll lose weight without effort. Blade tells her it's a good idea, so she starts right away. When the sword's spirit ignites, it asks her which enemy she's supposed to defeat. She tells it there's no enemy, she's doing this just to lose weight, nothing else. But the sword starts burning way too much. She turns into a raging fire beast with endless hunger. That's when Blade jumps in and uses his wind power until the flames go out, and she turns back to normal and slims down. All her friends are thrilled to see her return to her old self. But by nighttime, when they all go check on her, they find her eating again, and her weight is back up, so they know there's no hope for her. After that, Blade goes to the hospital for his routine checkup, and the doctor tells him he's improving and should continue his training. But he must not push himself, because that would be very dangerous for him. Then Claire, their friend, shows up with a girl named Maria and goes to speak with Blade. She tells him Maria needs his help. Blade recognizes Maria as one of the students who helped him defeat Ko, but all he remembers about her is that she was a failure, couldn't fight, kept falling, and was weak, and all that really hurts Maria. So she decides she no longer wants his help. But Claire stops her and explains that Blade is just blunt and doesn't know how to talk. So Maria tells him she needs his help with something really important. They head to the academy and sit down to eat together, and while they eat, she tells him that she's not human. He tells her that from the looks of it, she must be one of the night beasts. She tells him he's right and explains she has an extremely strong power, but ever since her last fight with Ko, she hasn't been able to control it. At first, she could hold the power inside, but now, the moment she touches anything, it breaks. That's how much power is leaking out. Blade tells her that it's because she pushed herself too hard during the fight with Ko and unleashed her power, and now she doesn't know how to contain it again. He tells her not to worry, he'll try to help her. Claire and the rest of their friends also say they'll support her until she gets better. She gets happy and agrees. Blade takes her to the arena, which he had prepared to be able to contain Maria's power. But Maria's nervous and warns him about her strength. It's really dangerous, and they might not be able to stop her. So Ernest tells her, that's happened to me many times, and every time, Blade was there and saved me. Maria calms down a little and starts removing some metal pieces from her arms and legs. She tells them those things restrain her power by about 160 times. They all get worried because that number is massive, meaning her power is truly no joke. And the moment she lets go, an enormous force bursts out of her, pushing them all away. They try to resist, and Blade realizes Maria is transforming, looking exactly like the Monster King. She even has the same mark on her head and the same power. Ernest is the first to decide to attack Maria. She grabs her sword and flies toward her, but Maria sends her flying back with one move. Ronaldo gets mad and charges too, but with just a finger motion from Maria, Ronaldo vanishes without a trace. Sophie flies like lightning from behind Maria and manages to grab her, using the artificial hero power to cancel gravity. It slams Maria into the ground, but not even 10 seconds pass before she recovers, and Sophie collapses to the ground. Then it's KO's turn. She turns into a dragon and breathes fire at Maria. But Maria absorbs all the fire and turns it into a tiny rock, then throws it back to Ko, who falls down burnt, and the only one left is Blade. When he goes to attack her, she blasts him into the barrier he set up. So he says, no choice now, and uses his forbidden power to finish off Maria, but she breaks his sword and still overpowers him. Then Ernest barely gets up and gives him her cursed sword, saying it's the only thing that'll work on Maria. He takes the sword and uses the same power that defeated the Monster King, attacking Maria, who finally can't resist and is defeated, and he passes out and collapses. They take him to the hospital, and when he wakes up, the doctor rushes to him upset, because she had warned him not to use that power since it's very dangerous for his life. He tells her he had no choice, and she asks him not to worry her again and to follow her advice. She reassures him that all his friends are okay, and Claire is using healing magic to treat them. Once he's out of the hospital and returns to the academy, he finds Maria in her Monster King form, acting weird. She tells him she found out the little secret he's hiding from everyone, that he's the great hero. He asks her not to tell anyone and to act like he's a normal student here at the academy, just like everyone else treats him. Then he goes with his friends to the king's room because the king asked for them. He tells them he knows what happened with Maria, but there are things they need to know. First, he's the one who allowed Maria into the academy. Second, her mother is human, but her father is the Monster King. Blade is shocked. His suspicion was right, and he had just unlocked the power of the daughter of his greatest enemy. After they leave the king's office, they find Maria speaking arrogantly, because she's stronger than them and showing off her power. Claire, her friend, is afraid of her and tells Blade that this isn't the Maria she knows. She wants her real friend back. At night, when Blade is finally exhausted and wants to sleep, Maria appears flying outside his window and tells him she wants to talk for a bit. When he refuses, she grabs him by his clothes and they fly to the rooftop. She tells him she knows Claire and the others are worried about the Maria they used to know, but that Maria is now living inside her mind, and she doesn't think she'll ever come back. When Blade asks her why, she tells him that when Maria was little, she lived with her mother. All she knew about her father was that he was dead. When her mom passed away, she got lost and was completely alone. It was extremely hard on her. So when the new Maria was born, the old one decided to live inside her, just to stop thinking and forget about her past and anything related to her father. Blade tells her he'll help and find a way to bring Maria back. She agrees, and the next day they all gather and bring in another girl to help. The girl tells them that the necklace around Maria's neck might help, because she suspects it's an old recording device used to store a message for the wearer. When opened, the message will play, and through it, they might be able to enter Maria's consciousness and convince her to come back. But doing that would lead to the end of the new Maria, the monster queen. Maria agrees, and they open the necklace. Inside is a message from her father, the monster king, telling her mother to take care of herself well. He says he loves her very much and knows she's upset because he left, but he has duties he must fulfill, and it's out of his hands. He asks her to protect their unborn child, and says if it's a girl, name her Maria. The moment old Maria hears that, she realizes her father did love her. She finally understands everything she had been wondering about. Her friends call out to her, and when she hears them, she decides to come out. They succeed, and Maria returns to them. But the surprise is that the old Maria did something great. She didn't get rid of the new Maria. Instead, she switches between them like they're twins. After that, Blade goes walking with his friends in the city when he sees a cart carrying a massive shipment pulled by a girl who's half horse. The moment he sees her, he recognizes her, and she's shocked because she hasn't seen the great hero in ages. He puts his hand over her mouth to silence her and tells her not to expose him in front of his friends because no one here knows he's the hero. She gets really nervous and keeps messing up in front of them. So he changes the subject and asks her what she's doing here. She tells him she's supposed to deliver a very important shipment to the king. He says he'll help her, him and his friends, and they all help carry the shipment until they reach the king and deliver it successfully. The king thanks Doni and tells her there's another mission he needs her for, and that is to study at his academy. She gets excited, but Blade gets scared, because he's sure she'll blow his cover now. After that, they all head back to the academy and Doni puts on a show in front of the students. It's a performance where she faces giant metal cubes that are nearly impossible to destroy. But Doni isn't just anyone, she's one of the royal guards. She smashes through all the metal cubes and melts them too. Everyone is amazed by her, and she acts in front of the students like she's still a guard, not their teacher. Blade tells her to treat them better and start acting like a teacher here at the academy. But she forgets and calls him the great hero in front of everyone, so he silences her again. The king arrives and says that Doni has known Blade for a very long time, because she's one of the royal guards. Everyone is shocked. They didn't know she was a guard, but they start wondering how someone like Doni knows a totally ordinary student like Blade. They all keep asking, and Blade can't answer, so he walks away. Ernest catches up to him and they walk through the city, but then they notice two simmering birds flying overhead. Ernest is very surprised and tells Blade that simmering birds are extremely rare. Only 1 or 2 exist in each continent, and they're responsible for protecting the continent they're in. So why are they here in the royal capital? Even weirder, the simmering birds start attacking the carts and smashing them. Ernest tells Blade this isn't normal at all for simmering birds. There's no way they'd hurt people. And why are they targeting the carts specifically? Blade tells her this is definitely something the king did. So they rush to the king's room at the academy. And for the first time, Ernest talks harshly to the king, asking what he messed up to make the simmering birds so mad and attacking the city like this. Blade tells him that earlier Doni was delivering an important shipment, and now the simmering birds are attacking all the carts, so the two events must be connected. The king calms them and says the simmering birds are looking for their egg, which he took. But before they get more upset, he didn't steal it, he was helping them. A simmering egg needs to be placed somewhere very high to hatch, and only under the sunset. If the timing passes without everything being ready, the egg will die and never hatch. The two simmering birds that attacked the city earlier chose a very bad spot. Because of them, the egg might not hatch. If they're really so worried, they can kindly help move the egg to a safe and high place, on top of the academy tower, so it can hatch. They agree and ask him what time the egg needs to hatch. He tells them tomorrow. So without wasting time, they head straight to the academy and gather all the students. They tell them they need to stall the simmering birds while the egg is being carried up to the academy tower. They must keep the birds far from the egg, because if the birds get too angry, they might accidentally destroy it. Their entire mission is just to distract the birds and keep them from noticing the egg being lifted. An hour before sunset, their mission begins. They split into 2 groups. One attacks the first simmering bird, the other the second. The first group comes up with a plan: tie iron wires around the simmering bird and attach them to the buildings to hold it back until sunset. But when they do, the bird flies off dragging the buildings with it. The plan fails. But the second simmering bird is attacked by Ko, Maria, and Ernest. Ko uses her dragon power and breathes fire at the simmering bird, but it's unaffected. Instead, Ko gets scared and runs off. Maria transforms into the monster queen and strikes the simmering bird, which weakens it a bit. Ernest follows up and burns it with her fire. Blade gives the signal to the academy to start lifting the egg now that they've got this bird under control. But the egg gets stuck halfway. They can't lift it higher. And worse, the first simmering bird that escaped is now flying toward them and has noticed the egg. They tell Blade to go and try lifting the egg up to the tower, while they cover his back and hold off the raging bird. At that moment, Blade remembers when he was fighting the Monster King, and his team told him the same words, so he gets nervous for them. But Ernest reassures him, saying they can handle it. He's seen them do it before. Blade trusts them and starts climbing the tower to lift the egg, but it's really hard for him. Doni shows up and tells him to climb on her back. She'll get him up the tower. He listens, and as soon as they reach the egg, Blade tries to lift it, but it's way too heavy. Doni tells him to hold it tight. She'll push it up from below. And she really is strong. She manages to push the egg until they finally get it to the top of the tower. The king is waiting up there and thanks them for completing the mission. But suddenly, the simmering bird comes toward them. The king tells them to leave it to him. He steps in front of the bird and starts speaking in some strange language to stop it. But the simmering bird knocks the king away. He crashes into the egg, hits his head, and passes out. Just like Blade expected, the king couldn't do anything. So Blade is forced to step in and use his forbidden power, which he's been warned not to use over 100 times. That power is the only thing that works on the simmering bird. It stops at midair. Then the sunset light hits, and the egg hatches. Inside are twins. The first person they see is Blade, so they treat him like their mom. Blade gets fed up with his life, but he succeeded in a new mission and saved the simmering bird family from extinction. A few days later, we see Blade walking with his sword, covered in blood, and he runs into Sophie at the academy. She tells him she's always wanted to fight him, and Blade replies that he did too. Sophie uses her artificial power to stop time and attacks Blade, but she's shocked that he's unaffected by her hits. When time resumes after 10 seconds, Blade keeps walking toward her, lifts her up, and stabs her with his sword. Sophie falls to the ground and dies, and we find out most of his friends also died because of him. But before you panic, it turns out it's just a simulation created by the principal. They enter it to train with each other, and no one gets hurt. Whoever dies in the game wakes up from the simulation and exits. After Sophie comes out, the king is sitting, excited, and asks Blade what he thinks of the new training game. Blade says it's good, but it has one problem: it's way too realistic. Someone could forget they're out of the game and end up killing their friends by mistake. The king says that would be a real disaster, so he changes their game location completely and takes them to a place like a kid's game, full of candy everywhere. Ernest is charging around happily, loving everything she's doing, and says to herself she never imagined live battles could be this fun. She keeps looking for Blade because she's always wanted to kill him, and now's the perfect chance. Claire and Yashika run into Kasim and Klee, and the girls defeat them both easily. Ernest finally finds Blade, runs toward him to finish him off, but Blade barely grabs his sword and swings it randomly. As soon as she steps in, she gets hit and dies, leaving the game. In the end, only Blade is left, so he wins. When he comes out, he finds Ernest sitting on the ground crying over her ruined pride, telling him there's no way he's a normal student. It's like she fought a superhuman. The king laughs at them, saying he really enjoyed the game. Since Blade can't stand him, he changes the system settings and loads a room full of monsters and creepy creatures, then forcefully puts the device on the king's head. The king enters the game, panics, and can't escape. Now he gets to feel what they went through and experience the fun himself. At lunch break, they all sit together, except Klee and Kasim, who sit at a separate table. Claire and Yashika are really confused why they're sitting alone. Blade tells them it's probably because they're upset after losing to them in the game today. They tell Blade they didn't mean to. Blade says no guy likes losing to a girl, and there's nothing they can do about it. Soon, they'll go back to normal. That night, Blade goes to sit with Kasim and Klee and asks them what's bothering them. They tell him they're really upset because they lost to Yashika and Claire. Blade tells them it's normal to lose once or twice. They can't always win. But they tell him losing to girls is different, especially if it's Claire and Yashika, because they like them and wanted to look strong to impress them. But Blade doesn't get it and tells them he likes all the girls in the academy. They say that's not what they meant. They really love them. That's when Ko jumps in through the window. She overheard everything they said and gives them advice. She tells them if they want to win the girls' hearts, they need to train hard, get stronger, challenge them again, beat them, and then confess. They love KO's plan and ask how they can get stronger. She says there's only one person who can help them, Blade. And Blade agrees to train them and help them improve. Meanwhile, the girls are still sitting and talking about Klee and Kasim. They're thinking maybe they should skip some training. So their power drops and Klee and Kasim feel stronger. But Ernest stops them and says if they do that, she'll punish them herself. That's when Ko enters and tells them that boys love strong girls, and they have to train and become even stronger, even if it makes the guys feel bad. Turns out Ko is playing both sides. She doesn't care about anyone's interests. She just wants to have fun. The next day, Kasim and Klee go train with Blade. He makes them lift heavy weights and increase their physical strength. Once he feels they're ready, he arranges another game with Yashika and Claire, and Ernest will be the judge. They all agree, and the battle begins. We expect Klee and Kasim to be stronger or at least last longer in the fight, but we're shocked when from the very first hit, Yashika knocks Klee out, and Claire takes out Kasim. Because they had also been training with Ernest and the girls. They learned and gained skills from each other, so their power increased a lot. But this time, the boys leave the game without feeling upset, admitting defeat to the girls, and that they really are stronger than them, and there's no shame in that. After that, the girls find a super cute-looking robot standing at the academy gate, and they instantly fall in love with it. They ask what it's doing here, and it shows them a picture of Blade, saying it's looking for him. So they take it to the academy arena, where Blade is training, working on storing his power so that when he releases it, he can control it properly without hurting himself. The moment Blade sees the robot, he destroys it immediately. The girls ask him why he did that, and he tells them the robot is one of the guards from the lower library. It came up from underground to kill him. Then the robot reassembles, but this time in the form of a girl. Blade destroys her once, then again, and again. She keeps regenerating, and they get fed up and ask him to explain what's going on. He tells them that this type of guard is found in the lower library. He's entered the library several times looking for more information about Ernest's sword, and this robot kept trying to stop him. He had to destroy it every time, so it came up from underground to finish him and stop him from returning to the library ever again. When the robot rebuilds again, the girls stop him from destroying her. Claire goes and talks to her and finds that the name Yona is written on her body. She asks Yona why she wants to kill Blade. Yona says Blade broke into the library many times, and because of him, she got scolded around 100 times by the guard leader and was fired because of him. She won't return until she finishes him. Because the girls like her a lot, they invite her to rest at the academy and promise they'll think of a plan to take Blade down together. They say all this right in front of him and don't care. After that, they go to Elise the problem solver. Blade sees them chatting with Yona, loving her, and even thinking of helping her take him down, so he gets upset and walks away. Sophie catches up to him and asks why he kept destroying Yona, since that's not his style. He tells her Yona is a robot and rebuilds every time, so it didn't matter to him. Sophie asks what he'd do if Yona ended up getting destroyed for real because of him. He says he doesn't know, he's never thought about it that way. Meanwhile, Yona tells the girls that she took the form of a girl so Blade would be nice to her and not destroy her like before, but it didn't work. Ernest says she has a solution to make Blade stop destroying her. Because they know Blade is a kind person and would never destroy her, he only did it because he knew she'd rebuild. Ernest's plan is to disconnect Yona from the main board, so she becomes independent and gains full control over herself. That way, if Blade destroys her, she'll actually die, and he won't do that. To prove it, they tell Blade they'll hold a little match between him and Yona. When Blade agrees, Yona stands before him and tells him she's disconnected from the main board. This will be her first solo fight, and if she dies, she's gone for good. Blade is shocked and doesn't know what to do. When she attacks, he refuses to fight back to avoid hurting her. She launches at him like a missile, beating him into the ground until he surrenders. She wins, and everyone cheers her name, happy she's now one of them. She goes to have lunch with them at the academy. But during lunch, Yona tells them that ever since she disconnected from the main unit, she's been feeling strange. She tried to contact the main unit several times but failed. It fully rejected her for being a traitor. This caused her internal control to begin a self-destruct countdown because no one is managing her. Everyone is shocked because this means Yona will die. But she tells them it might stop if she gets a new manager. She asks Blade to become her new manager so she won't be destroyed. Blade is forced to agree, and suddenly Yona starts acting like his personal maid, even wearing a maid outfit and serving him food herself. She copies Sophie's mannerisms, and Sophie gets jealous the moment she sees this. She gets annoyed and challenges Yona to see who can serve Blade better. Blade gets stuck between the two of them. Even in training, they compete, each hating the other. Sophie asks Yona to stop copying her, but it's no use. At night, when Blade is ready to sleep, both of them go to his room and tell him they'll hold a competition between the two to see who can stay awake the longest while he sleeps. Blade doesn't care about what they're doing because the day was exhausting. He passes out, and the two sit on the floor watching him sleep. Yona tells Sophie to give up because she's a robot and won't sleep for the rest of her life. Sophie replies that she trained before coming here to stay awake for 7 days straight. Yona says in that case, neither of them will win, because in a few hours, Blade will wake up. They both go silent. Yona decides to break the long silence and tells Sophie that she loves Blade a lot and doesn't hate him like everyone thought. Because back when she was guarding the library, she was completely alone. No one ever visited, except Blade, and she used to feel incredibly happy every time he destroyed her and she regenerated. It was the only thing that made her feel alive. Sophie tells her she also loves Blade deeply and is very connected to him, because she was created as his backup. Without him, she wouldn't even exist. When Yona hears that, she tells Sophie that since she's Blade's backup, she should respect and love her like she loves Blade. Sophie tells her she doesn't hate her either and is willing to be friends. Blade, still awake, hears them making up and gets really happy for them. The next day, they go to breakfast together. It's clear they're becoming close friends. Everyone is happy for them. But sadly, the joy doesn't last, because Yona finds the countdown still going and only a few hours remain before she explodes. Everyone gets upset for her, and she asks them to stay with her until the last moment. They agree and decide to throw her a farewell party. Everyone attends. It's a really fun party. But Ernest notices Blade is missing from the celebration. She looks for him, thinking this isn't the time to disappear. But sadly, she can't find him. When it's time for Yona to explode, she creates a barrier between herself and the others so no one gets hurt. Everyone cries and says goodbye. But at the very last second, nothing happens. They're all confused. Then Blade rises from underground. They ask him where he went. He tells them he went to the library and met the main unit. He begged it to let Yona back into the system, and he succeeded in convincing it. That's why Yona didn't explode. Everyone is thrilled, especially Yona, who runs to hug him and thanks him so much for what he did for her. After that, they all gather in the grand battle arena, and we find them all lying on the ground cheering for Ronaldo, because he's the last one left, and they want him to defeat Blade, who beat them all alone. Ronaldo keeps showing off to impress Ernest, but Ernest isn't even thinking about him. When her friends tell her to cheer Ronaldo up a bit, she's surprised Ronaldo is even still alive. Those words crush Ronaldo, but they start cheering again to push him to get revenge on Blade. Ronaldo grabs his weapon and runs at Blade with all his speed, but Blade just takes 2 steps to the side, and Ronaldo falls flat on his face. His weapon breaks, and the battle ends. Blade wins, and they were all expecting that. So they leave without even waiting for Ronaldo to get up. Ernest runs off saying she can finally go eat, annoyed at Ronaldo for delaying her. Later, Ronaldo sits alone in the garden, relaxing, when Maria shows up and finds him so chill and asks how he's sitting there calm after being beaten by Blade. It's not like it was the first time. She tells him that if she were him, she'd be thinking of a million ways to beat Blade, because she's tired of always following behind. She wants to stand beside him or even surpass him because she's not weak. At that moment, Ronaldo feels small and he realizes Maria's right. He tells her he'll find a way to defeat Blade too. He's not weak either, and Blade can't keep outshining them. He thanks her for waking him up. Then Elise shows up and says she's joining them. Ronaldo decides to gather all the friends Blade defeated and presents his idea to team up and defeat Blade. They all agree. They want to beat him, even just once. But Ernest asks why he's acting like he's the leader. Ronaldo says that's not important now. What matters is what they're gonna do about Blade. One of them suggests attacking Blade while he's asleep. Another says they could poison him. But Ernest tells them all those methods are weak. Blade always beat them using just his sword. That's why, when they face him, it should be face to face, no powerful weapons or anything else to help. So Ernest goes first. She takes her usual sword, gets ready, and charges at Blade. But Blade stands confidently, and the moment she gets close, he taps her weapon with his, which instantly breaks, and she loses. Yashika says it's her turn, and as she suggested, she goes to attack him in his sleep, but finds Yona awake. The moment Yona sees her, she sets her on fire. Yashika comes back burnt. Blade remains untouched. Ronaldo tells them to leave it to him. He fixes his weapon carefully and then goes to attack Blade. But before he even takes a step, the weapon explodes in his face, because he didn't glue it properly after Blade broke it last time. Then Maria tries to sneak up and strike from behind, but Blade accidentally kicks something into her face, and she falls. They keep trying different methods, but all lead to failure. They all go crazy, and their urge to get revenge on Blade grows stronger. They start thinking of a way to make Blade surrender, but after a bit of thinking, they realize they'll never beat him. So they come up with a plan to make him surrender without anyone getting hit, by using their lives as leverage. Just like with Yona, when Blade knew she'd be in danger, he didn't fight back and surrendered. They'll use the same trick on him. The next day, they have a medical class taught by Blade's doctor. Blade notices Klee, Kasim, and Ronaldo are missing and asks the girls about them. They get nervous and ask him to focus on class so the doctor doesn't notice. Then suddenly, 3 people in masks come in and kidnap the doctor. When she asks what's going on, one of them whispers and tells her to pretend she's being kidnapped. Apparently, the doctor had always wanted to be an actress, so she starts screaming and calling for Blade to save her. Ernest tells Blade that a group of terrorists came to kidnap the doctor, and she pretends to go save her. The girls follow, but the so-called terrorists take her as hostage too. They all start yelling for Blade to come rescue them, and Blade watches the scene unfold, completely confused. When Ernest sees he's still sitting and not moving, she gets mad and yells at him to come save her. The terrorists warn him that if he does anything, they'll finish Ernest off right there. Turns out Blade was confused because he already recognized that the ones in the masks were Ronaldo, Klee, and Kasim. He asks them what they're doing. Everyone's shocked. They got exposed. They ask how he knew it was them. He tells them by their weird walk. He's never seen anyone walk like that. They're all upset that all their effort and acting went to waste. But Blade turns out to be dumb. Even though he figured out his friends were in disguise, he still believes they really kidnapped the girls, so they go along with it and pretend it's true. Ronaldo tells him he knows Blade is weak against his friends, and asks him to surrender. They all start begging him to just say the words, "I surrender." But the moment Blade draws his sword, a powerful gust of energy blows over them like a storm. They all fall to the ground, unable to get up. Ernest stands, furious, and literally bursts into flames, charging at Blade, but a second later, she's lying on the ground next to the others. In the end, they all surrender and give up trying to make Blade surrender. The next day, Ernest is with Blade walking around the academy, and they see a girl celebrating her birthday. Blade doesn't really understand what she's doing, so she tells him she's celebrating with her friends. Blade replies that all of this is pointless and no one's ever celebrated him before. Ernest is shocked and goes to ask Dion about the day Blade was born, but Dion doesn't know the exact date. All she knows is that it should be his birthday in about a month from now. So she gathers her friends to think of a gift Blade would actually like. One of them says Blade always eats one specific meal and really loves it, so they could make it for him with a small party, and she's sure he'll be really happy. They all love the idea. The king just happens to be passing by and overhears them. He tells them it's a great idea, and that he'll help them create the best dish in the world out of Blade's favorite food. But the king always likes to go overboard, so he gathers all the students and takes them outside the academy, building large gates and saying that the gates won't open until they complete the missions he gives them. The first mission, as announced by the king's assistant, is that they must gather around 11 billion calories. By hunting monsters, eating them, and collecting their meat. They have only 3 days to complete the mission. Blade stands there shocked and confused, not understanding the purpose of what they're doing. When he talks to his friends, he finds them all super excited about the mission, because they're the only ones who know the real reason behind it. They go hunt their first beast and set a trap for it, and once the plan works, they bring it back to their camp. They cook it and use its hide to make clothes that help them move better in the forest they're in. The next day, they finish their first mission in less time than the king said, so the king tells them he's proud of them and gives them the second mission. He hands out sheets with a bunch of ingredients and tells them to gather everything listed. They'll need it for the academy's food supplies. They take the first sheet and find out they need to hunt the celery beast. They head to its cave and Ernest lights her sword, but they tell her she can't burn it. It'll taste better if it's fresh and chopped. Blade hears them and is very surprised. It's the first time they've taken such a silly mission this seriously. They easily take down the celery beast because it's not as strong as the monsters they've faced before. Next, they need to hunt the boxing king, which turns out to be a giant corn monster. Blade goes to hunt it but realizes the name fits. It's great at boxing. When Blade tries to cut it from the ground with his sword, they stop him. The paper says they need to defeat it in a boxing match. So Blade puts on gloves and trades punches with the corn until he captures it, his face swollen. The next mission is to collect hot peppers. When they arrive at the location, the smell is so strong they can't handle it. They all start crying, even Yona, who technically doesn't have tear ducts, cries too. Then they go to hunt the sunflower blossom. At first, the field looks really peaceful and beautiful, but as soon as they take one step forward, all the flowers fire laser beams that burn them. Still, they manage to catch it in the end. Then they go to catch the screaming carrot. When Blade tries to pull it out of the ground, it screams so loudly it deafens everyone. Ernest apologizes because it was her fault. She didn't read the last line that warned about the cursed carrot's scream. Yona tells everyone to cover their ears. She'll catch the carrot because she won't be affected by the noise. She succeeds and catches the carrot, and now they've collected all the ingredients on the list. They ride the giant carrot and fly back to camp. They all sit down and eat dinner after the tough and long day they've had. Everyone is exhausted, and the king tells them there's just one final mission left that they'll do tomorrow, and they must prepare well for it. The next day, the final mission is to hunt the meat for the main dish. Turns out they need to hunt a massive cow beast, and the king gives the task to Blade since he's the strongest. Everyone cheers for him, but suddenly, a huge monster appears, as tall as a building, and eats the cow they were going to hunt. The king doesn't cancel the mission. Instead, he says that the behemoth's meat will be way tastier and more satisfying, and tells them to go hunt it. Blade says, "Of course, you've got nothing to lose." But instead of letting Blade fight it alone, everyone decides to join and support him. Ernest uses her sword's ultimate power. Sophie uses her artificial skill, though it only lasts 10 seconds. Everyone launches from a different direction to attack the monster. But the moment the monster steps down, the shockwave blasts everyone away in different directions, leaving only Blade standing alone in front of it. Blade knows he can't beat this monster with normal power. The only way to win is to use his forbidden power, so he looks to Maria and asks for her help to combine their powers, and she agrees instantly. When their energies merge, Blade's sword turns into a massive blade of fire, and with a single strike, he splits the monster in two. At last, after a long battle, they succeed in hunting the beast. Afterward, Blade goes to the infirmary to check on himself after using a part of his power. He's surprised when the doctor tells him his strength has grown. He can now use a small portion of it, thanks to his consistent training at the academy. He's happy and goes to tell his friends, but finds they've prepared a surprise birthday party for him. They serve his favorite dish as a gift, telling him that they went through all that trouble just to make him a unique meal. Blade is touched. Tears escape his eyes as he eats, telling them that, for the first time, he feels what it's like to have a family. The next day during training, we see Sophie practicing with Blade and their friends, but she seems a bit different and asks Blade to teach her his dragon strike. He begins teaching her, but suddenly, another version of Sophie appears and stops Blade from what he's doing. It turns out this is the real Sophie, and the one who asked Blade to teach her the dragon strike is a duplicate. As soon as the real Sophie appears, her duplicate quickly leaves the area, and everyone stands there shocked and confused. Meanwhile, Sophie's duplicate heads to a distant warehouse, where we find 5 versions of Sophie, numbered 1 to 5. These are the first 5 copies made during the experiment. She tells them she managed to learn something about the dragon strike. They tell her that's not what they were trying to do. They wanted to eliminate Blade. She tells them what she learned might help them take Blade down, and she transfers all the information she gathered in data form. Then they tell Sophie number 3 it's her turn to infiltrate the academy and try to eliminate Blade. The next day, we see Blade at the training field, and Sophie number 3 asks him to train with her. But everyone realizes this is a copy of Sophie because she acts strangely, so they go along with her behavior, and Blade agrees to her request. But when the real Sophie sees her copy, she attacks her. The copy gets scared and runs away. Sophie's friends don't know what to do about this new problem, so they sit down to lunch and talk it over, trying to figure out what Sophie's copies want. Since they don't know anything, they assume these might be Sophie's twin sisters. One of them says she suspects Sophie's sisters are evil and came to take out Blade, so they need to protect him and think of a plan to get rid of them. They try to speak quietly so they don't hurt Sophie's feelings, but she hears them and tells them she's willing to sacrifice herself for Blade and doesn't care what happens to her. Later, we see the copies of Sophie in the warehouse. A shadowy figure calls to them and tells them to carry out the mission they were created for, eliminating Blade as quickly as possible. That night, the real Sophie goes to check on Blade while he's sleeping. When she sees Yona awake and guarding him, she leaves and goes outside the academy to get some air, only to find one of her copies standing outside. She tells her to leave because there's nothing she can do to Blade as long as she's around. Sophie tries to reason with her and explain that the original purpose of the project they were created in wasn't to eliminate Blade. She was the final version, and she knows that. But her copies were taken after the project was shut down and experimented on further, reprogrammed to kill Blade. When her copy refuses to believe her, Sophie attacks. She has the chance to finish her but can't bring herself to do it because that's not what she learned from Blade. She lets her escape. The next day, Blade comes up with a clever idea to convince Sophie's copies that he's dead by entering the simulation chamber and pretending he was killed by one of Sophie's copies. It works even better because the version they get is a bit dim and doesn't know much, so she believes Blade is really dead. But when she returns to the others and they tell her she was tricked, she gets furious and takes the other copies with her to the academy to get revenge and finish off Blade. At that point, the academy falls into chaos, and everyone runs from Sophie's copies. Blade tries to stop them, but he struggles because they're too many. They use their artificial powers to create a massive black hole meant to destroy everyone in the academy. But the real Sophie shows up just in time and jumps into the middle of the vortex, stopping them. The black hole explodes, and nothing happens to the students. But Sophie is the one who collapses and faints. Blade panics and rushes her to the hospital, but the copies aren't harmed at all. When she wakes up and he confirms she's okay, he tells her he had an idea: to talk to the copies and convince them to join the academy and become part of it, leaving all those ideas behind. Sophie tells him that's impossible. These copies aren't programmed like her. She was saved by the king, but they were stolen and experimented on until they became more like machines. They've been programmed to kill him. Plus, they're temporary copies, and in a short while, they'll die anyway. Letting them into the academy would be dangerous, and she'll never allow that. But Blade reassures her and says everything will be okay. The next day, they're shocked to find out that Sophie submitted her resignation letter to the king. When the king tells them the news, they're all stunned, and Ernest asks how he could let Sophie leave during a situation like this. The king tells her that it's not up to him and that Sophie is free to do whatever she wants. Ernest snaps at him, asking how he can speak so coldly. But the king isn't cold at all. He's actually very sad about Sophie leaving but just doesn't want to show it in front of them. Blade is the only one who understands this, so he tells Ernest to quiet down and says they're going to search for Sophie everywhere and convince her to come back. The king asks them if they know where she went, and they tell him she probably went to meet the 5 copies to convince them to stop what they're doing. The king says he suspects she really did go to the copies, but not to talk to them. He believes she went to destroy them and didn't tell anyone so nobody would get hurt because of her. He says maybe she has a point and they should give her the chance to handle this her own way and decide by dawn whether to go after her or not. Blade goes off to think for a while, and just before dawn, he decides there's no way he's leaving Sophie at a time like this. He heads to the academy gate and finds all their friends have already gathered and were waiting for him, telling him each of them decided to go after Sophie 5 minutes after leaving the king's room. Blade is overjoyed and fires them up, saying they have to bring Sophie back no matter what happens. They set off to find her and come across her at the warehouse where the copies had been, but they find out the copies left before she arrived. Ernest goes to talk to Sophie and asks her to come back. Sophie tells them everything from the start, about how she's basically a copy, about the project, and how they were created to be replacements for the great hero. Ernest asks her, if they were a replacement project for the great hero, then why are they so determined to eliminate Blade? Blade starts to feel like he's been exposed, but his friends turn out to be incredibly clueless because they misunderstand and think Sophie's copies are trying to eliminate Blade as part of training. If they succeed, it means they might stand a chance at taking down the great hero. To them, Blade isn't just a regular student like they thought. Blade feels relieved and, for the first time, thanks them for being so dumb. They start thinking of a plan to take down Sophie's copies. Elise says she has an idea, and then we see them sending a message to the location of Sophie's copies saying they want to hold a battle between the 5 copies and Blade at the academy. Survival of the fittest. It's actually a trap set by Blade and his friends. Sophie's copies fall for it and head to the academy to fight Blade. Blade is indeed there, waiting for them. But the plan is that Blade doesn't harm them. He'll just buy time until Elise can analyze their data, locate their developer, and try to contact him so they can reprogram the copies to be more like Sophie. The battle begins, and everyone watches in suspense without interfering. Blade is the only one facing Sophie's copies. He doesn't attack, only defends, but he can't use his full strength, which puts him in a tough spot. His friends don't abandon him though. They invent capsules containing their own power and toss them to him in the middle of battle. Once he puts them into his sword, the sword absorbs the energy, and Blade unleashes an overwhelming force to counter their attacks skillfully. But Sophie's copies aren't easy to beat. When they realize Blade is unaffected by their attacks, they synchronize and use their artificial powers to flip the entire world. Suddenly the ground is above and the sky is below, and all the battle rules change. Blade gets trapped and can't cope with the new environment. That's when the real Sophie jumps in, flies to him, and saves him at the last second, pulling him far away from the field. But just before he lands again, there's a massive explosion. When Blade returns to the ground, he sees Sophie's first copy standing in front of him, silently not attacking. He asks her why, and she replies coldly, "Our time's up." Suddenly, her body parts start falling one by one, and the rest of the copies collapse too. Their time has nearly expired. Blade quickly calls Elise to find a solution, but the shock comes when she tells him she found the location of their developer, but he's already dead. At that moment, Sophie takes a crazy step and tries to transfer her data to the other copies, hoping she can rewrite their control systems before it's too late. Blade senses her effort and shares some of his energy with her. In that instant, the copies start opening their eyes again. They've returned to consciousness. Time passes, and we see Blade recovering in the hospital from his battle wounds. Copy number 1 comes to visit him, perfectly fine, and thanks him for what he did for her and the other copies. But she tells him she's still sticking to her decision and is just waiting for him to wake up so she can finish him off. Blade laughs at her and feels at ease. He's completed another one of his missions successfully.